tearing itself apart from the non-organic nature to which the genus lapses. The organic being, which is thus mediated through the non-organic nature with the genus, individual to particular to universal, is the sex relation. The conclusion of the syllogism is the connection of the two sides, which are the whole organic being, or the diremption of this whole into opposed self-subsistent sexes. The sublation of the individual and the resultant being of the genus, but of the genus as an individual actual being which initiates the cycle again. The result is therefore that the individual has separated itself off from the genus. This self-subsistent individual is therefore related to a being to which, as genus, it is indifferent. The genus has sundered itself into self-subsistent beings, each of which, as its whole, is object to itself, but outside of itself. In the first process, we have being for self. In the second, the representation and knowledge of an other. In the third, the unity of both, of the other and itself. It is the true actualization of the... No, I think this is where we stopped.
Yeah.
It is the true actualization of the notion, the complete self-subsistence of both, in which each also knows itself in the other as its own self. It is the relation which has become purely ideal, so that each is ideal to itself, is in itself universal. The pure non-objectivity is set up in the self as such. So he's sort of laying out the self-subsistent individual being that is of the organic environment, but not the same thing as the organic environment. Something along those lines. So the organic being begins with singularity and rises to the genus, but just as immediately this course is the reverse. The simple genus descends to singularity for the consummation of individuals. Yes, exactly. In the genus resulting from their sublation is no less the becoming of the immediate singularity of the child. The other to the universal life of the earth is thus the truly organic form of life which continues itself in its genus. This is in the first instance the vegetable world, the first stage of being for self, of reflection into self, but also immediate formal being for self, not yet the genuine infinity. The plant discharges its moments from itself as free members and is only the subjective point of life. Plant life, therefore, begins where the vital principle gathers itself into a point, and this point sustains and produces itself, repels itself, and produces new points. Okay, so he's talking about plants as sort of a self-generating slash regenerating points. He's sort of trying to talk about how life as a plant, like if you take a cutting from a tree or a bush, you can start a new plant. You can't do that from a human. Although the science is getting there, right? We're not quite there, but
Yeah, we can kind of 3D print
yeah,
stuff right now. I think at least skin.
yeah. I I'd be very scared to meet the new human who is a full cutting. I mean, I think we could clone.
If you do it that way, it'd be like a twin at that point.
I think we could clone. I just think there's so many safeguards that if we're already doing it, it's not exactly public yet. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
That would be terrifying because they've already done it with a sheep. So I'm pretty sure they could do it with a
Yeah,
human.
I
It's
think
just not public. You can't apply to make a clone of your brother that you just lost and the funeral
yeah.
was yesterday and now they woke it's like on Enterprise. You wake up the new uh this is the thing I hate
But
about I'm going to veer way off here. I'm sorry, but
there
this is
are
the thing I this is the thing
services
I
to
go
do that
ahead.
with dead dogs.
Really? See,
Yes.
this is
In
the thing
fact,
I hate about the final episode of Enterprise. They had an episode about mid-third season where they had to clone Trip, and they wake him up and then they use him as spare parts to to make the old Trip better, give him the surgery he needs and then he'll live, right? And I'm like, okay, we get to that episode, the very last episode, and I'm like, you've got the cuttings, just make yourself a new wake up a new trip and keep going. Um, and that discussion dovetails into Dune, where you had Gurney Halleck. No, it's not Gurney Halleck. It's the other guy. Uh, who here read Dune, or at least watch the movie or the TV show? Like you have Paul Atreides, you have who's the son. You have Gurney Halleck, who's Jean-Luc Picard before Jean-Luc Picard was Jean-Luc Picard in the movie, and then you had Paul's best friend, and he dies somewhere in there, but then he's cloned. Like Paul's best friend is cloned to the nth degree. Like he keeps dying and coming back. He's constantly resurrected, right? And I'm like, they proved in the third season of Enterprise that you could clone him and he could just come back and he's fine. But then in the final episode, Trip dies and they just don't bring him back. And I'm like, already proven the science. Just go anyway. Sorry. I told you I'm going to veer way off. So I'm going to start reading The Plant Nature 343 and stop waxing lyrical about Star Trek because, yeah. That last episode was horrible. I don't know if you saw it, but if you haven't, don't watch the final episode of Enterprise. Just don't. It's it's not canon.
Too
All
late.
right.
Years too
No,
late.
yeah. Okay, so the subjectivity in virtue of which being or of which organic being exists as a singular unfolds itself into an objective organism in the shape of a body articulated into parts which are separate and distinct. In the plant, which is only the first immediate stage of subjective vitality, the objective organism and its subjectivity are still immediately identical.
Yeah, base identity makes sense already in that sense.
Okay. Consequently, the process whereby the plant differentiates itself into distinct parts and sustains itself is one in which it comes forth from itself and falls apart into a number of individuals, the whole plant being rather the basis for these individuals than a subjective unity of members. And you notice the translator put Boden there, which means basically the ground for like the blood and Boden is a very Germanic saying. So it's blood and soil, right? So the whole plant being rather the basis, the soil from which the individuals uh, arise, right? It's the same source, right? Um, it's like I was talking about cuttings. The part, bud, branch, and so on is also the whole plant. A further consequence is that the difference of the organic parts is only a superficial metamorphosis, and one part can easily assume the function of the other. Now, what's interesting to me, and I think I brought it up with Harrison, and Harrison kind of shrugged me off, like, okay, that's nice, but what one thing I brought up was that Hegel looks at animals and um he sees beings that are not subjectively conscious to themselves except for through instinct. But the fact is that we cannot access the brains of those animals and tell whether that is actually the case. Okay. So all we can do, is even though we strive, this is my commentary on this. Even though we strive to understand the other animals and plants around us, we can't actually, like, again with Star Trek, we can't live the life of those animals or plants and actually tell how much consciousness of the outside world and themselves they actually have. So what Hegel is describing here is more like what we can tell from our point of view as scientifically as possible, but we can never leave our point of view to make that. So it raises a question in my head, and maybe it's an idle question, how thin the line is between phenomenological uh, observation and scientific observation is given this. Do you know what I mean? Because we can say a lot about ourselves, right, as humans, and how we work and how we think, and that's that's basically the subject of the phenomenology and the logic is human thought, both in appearance and in actuality, right? But when we make judgments about other life forms on this planet of filled with life forms, we're we're really I don't want to say we're making a guess, but we're still working from our own point of view, our perspective. I don't know. I don't know. Does any of that make sense?
Yeah. Although I was also thinking there is to a certain extent at least being able to communicate with some of those other beings, which we have to a limited extent, especially like apes.
Or whales?
Yeah, I don't know if we know how to talk to them, but
Well, I mean, I'm sure we don't know how to talk to them, but we can like mimic the sounds and
right.
like
Like
basically be like the apes and like beat our chests,
I mean, the
and
I'm saying like with gorillas, they've actually had like sign language to talk to each other, and then of course they kind of trying to they're finding some sort of languages in like dolphin,
yeah,
starting to kind of figure out the grammar and
those
stuff.
things have huge brains. Yeah.
Yeah, which is why at the end of what is it, Douglas? I can't remember the name off the top of my head for some reason, but Douglas Adams stories,
Hmm.
where they left the planet.
Smart,
Yeah,
actually. Very, very smart. Yeah. I think Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman even nod to that book a little bit in their Good Omens uh, story from 1989, where they talk about dolphins and whales having huge brains. Um, I think they're nodding to Doug Adams in that a little bit. I think everybody who does fantasy or sci-fi like nods to Doug Adams at some point, and I've never read Doug Adams, so I need to. I know I'm horribly culturally bereft not having read the Hitchhiker's Guide. Everybody I've talked to who's read it has been like, "What is wrong with you, dude? Like seriously."
I mean, I haven't read Dune, so anything Dune.
Yeah. You can skip it. It's space based in the far future, a religious cult that controls the galaxy. Um, oh, did you hear that Trump had a golden calf?
Yeah.
Excuse me, a golden statue
Well,
consecrated to himself in
I
Florida?
heard that they had to both redo it to get rid of the turkey neck, and also the guy had to hold it hostage because they were trying to not pay him for it as per usual. And so he locked it up and eventually was able to get paid for it to get,
Smart, smart man. Seriously. Oh,
yeah, the
of
golden
course.
calf for worship is back again.
like the priest who consecrated it literally had to say, "This is not a golden idol." Like he got up on the podium and said something to that effect, and I was like, "You've got to be kidding. You're not fooling anybody, man. No one." Okay, just to finish this out, a further consequence is that the difference of the organic parts is only a superficial metamorphosis, and one part can easily assume the function of the other. And that's true, again, with cuttings. I'm just going to roll right into the Zuzats because, I keep rolling on and off the subject. And so maybe this is what we need to do is just keep reading and commenting and whatnot. Whereas the geological organism, the planet, is the mere system of shape devoid of ideality. With the subjectivity of plant life, ideality now enters in. But as the ideality present in all its members, life is essentially a living being. And this is merely excited by the outer world. Here, therefore, the causal relation falls away, and generally, in the sphere of life, all the categories of the understanding cease to be valid. If, however, these categories are still to be employed, then their nature must be transformed. and then it can be said that life is its own cause. Huh. The proposition can be advanced that everything lives in nature. This is sublime and is supposed to be speculative, but the notion of life, i.e., life in itself, which of course is found everywhere, is one thing. Real life, the subjectivity of the living organism in which each part exists as vivified, is another. It's a difference between a universal and an actual living.
The abstract and the concrete universal.
Yes, and he's drawing a woo, yeah, he's drawing a real uh he's drawing a real line between these two, which I find fascinating because I wish Lenin had gone past just reading the science of logic and read this, because he would have been like, wait a minute, wait the fuck a minute. There it is. There it is. Like right there, right there. Okay, sorry. I'm extremely excited about this because he actually draws the fucking line that half the time I have to like draw in, you know. Okay, so yeah, thus the geological organism is alive, not in its separate parts, but only as a whole. It is only potentially alive, not in present existence. But the living organism, too, differentiates itself into a subjective and a dead being. On the one hand, in its woody structure, in its bones, it makes itself the presupposition of its frame in the individual, as is the case in the geological organism as a whole. But on the other hand, the living organism is the shape which is inhabited by the substantial form. This is determinative not only in respect of the spatial relationships of the parts, but is equally the unrest of the process in which the form determines the physical properties out of itself, so that from that process it may produce shape. So he's describing what he's saying in the abstract is that yes, there's a frame, but there's also the moving parts inside the plant that turn the seed into a bud, the bud into a flower, the flower into a full plant, blah blah blah. It's the same thing, and it in itself, through its own life, produces its own change. So the plant, as the first self-subsistent subject that still has its origin in immediacy, is, however, the feeble infantile life that has not yet developed within itself the moment of difference. Like every living organism, the nature of a plant is particularized. But whereas in the animal, the particularity is at the same time a particularity in contrast with which the subjectivity as soul is also universal. In the plant, the particularity is quite immediately identical with the plant's vitality in general. It does not exist as a state distinct from the plant's inner life. On the contrary, the quality of the plant completely pervades its general vegetative nature, instead of being distinct from it as in the animal. In the plant, therefore, the members are particular only in relation to each other, not to the whole. The members themselves are in turn wholes, as in the dead organism, where in sedimentary strata they are also external to each other. Although then the plant posits itself as the other of itself in order perpetually to idealize this contradiction. This differentiation is only formal. What it posits as the other is not a veritable other, but the same individual as the subject. Now, I'm 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 thinking about ants and bees, and how if you look at how ants and bees are structured in their own selves, they actually, if you study them, they have a collective consciousness that the hive or the whatever ants have. Um, and I'm seriously wondering whether at some basic level plants also have something similar at a much more simple level, right? And so his observation that well, I mean, like he says, the differentiation is only formal. You could almost say, you could almost speculate that the differentiation from our perspective seems only formal, but actually could be something quite different. Again, shapeshift into a plant and realize how formal
I
or
just
or real it is. You know what I mean?
and I
So we
just was
make an
starting to
educated
take
guess.
a look, and apparently there are some precursors to the nervous system in plants, but
Yeah,
precursors like proto nervous systems.
right. I mean, when we look at the structure of our brains and nervous system, right?
Mhm.
And we look at the physicality of it. I'm struck by how similar it is to plant structures and roots. And one of the favorite things that laymen like to say about, if you have an injury and the doctor tells you, well, that nerve is not growing back. Well, that's not actually true. Now, over your lifetime, the nerve could grow back if nurtured properly, right? But doctors don't work like that. They want the nerve to be back tomorrow, which is not how the thing works, right? And so surgery, right up to today, is hard pressed to regenerate what was there in terms of reconnecting it to the nervous system. And the only places that we really like try to do something about it is where it's really obvious, like trying to do spinal surgery, for instance, because it's real obvious that half of the spine is just your nerves. You know what I mean? And surgery for that has been done, um, and been successful. I digress. Um, um, wow. In plant life, therefore, growth is predominantly an increase of the plant itself as an alteration of form. Hmm.
Animal growth is only alteration of size, but at the same time remains
Hmm.
one shape. Yeah, because plant kind of has that fractal kind of growing pattern versus we're pretty much the same shape, just grows entirely.
Yeah. The growth of the plant is an assimilation into itself of the other, but as a self multiplication, this assimilation is also a going forth from itself. It is not a coming to self as an individual, but a multiplicity of the individuality, so that the one individuality is only the superficial unity of the many. The individuals remain a separate plurality, indifferent to each other, which do not proceed from their substance as a common essence. Schultz therefore says the growth of plants is a perpetual addition of new parts which did not exist previously. Now you look at nature, you look at the growth of, say, something that's, a weed like poison ivy. Once it starts growing, it just goes everywhere, right? You go back into these rainforests, um, bush sections on islands, and like poof, it's like poof, it if not cut back, the vegetation can sometimes overwhelm houses and civilization storefronts if it's not cut back, right? It just keeps going and going and going. Where was I? Fuck.
Just after the
Okay.
quote.
Yeah, that's right. Bound up with the homogeneity of the parts of the plant, therefore, is their falling asunder, because they are not related to each other as inner qualitative differences. In other words, the organism, and I'll go back to that quote, has not at the same time acquired a system of viscera. It is a production of itself in externality, but all the same, a growth altogether from within outwards, not a sort of external accretion as in crystallization. Ein äußerliches Ankristallisieren. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the morphology. I don't know exactly where this came from. Okay. He says, although then the plant posits itself as the other of itself in order perpetually to idealize this contradiction. This differentiation is only formal. What it posits as the other is not a veritable other, but the same individual as the subject. And if we look down here at Goethe, the Zur Morphologie, the more imperfect a creature is, the more do the parts resemble each other. And the more are they like the whole. The more perfect the creature is, the more dissimilar its parts become. I swear I've read this before in one of our previous readings. Fuck.
Um, he
I mean,
did.
that's okay. In the first case, the whole is more or less like the parts. In the second, the whole is dissimilar to the parts. So, like humans, like if we look at a whole human, it's totally different from if I cut open the human and take out the liver and the spleen. The liver and the spleen look completely different from what I look like outwardly as a complete human morphologically. You do the same thing to a plant and it resembles itself, right? From stem to stern. Uh, the more the parts resemble each other, the less they are subordinated to each other. Subordination of the parts betokens a more perfect creature. So the liver and the spleen are subordinated to me, in other words. Okay. Can I just take a second? I just need to check where everyone is, and I'll be right back.
No worries. I was also going to say, it probably sounds similar to earlier because he did go over the same thing in the transition to plants. So, ooh. In way concludes with the process of the genus is a perennial production of new individuals. Because the self-like universality is objective one of the individuality does not separate itself from real particularization, but is only submerged in it. So the plant is not yet a self-subsistent subjectivity over against its implicit organism. Therefore, it can neither freely determine its place, i.e., move from the spot, nor is it for itself in face of physical particularization, individualization of implicit organism. Consequently, nutrition is not an interrupted process, but a continuous flow, and relates itself to not to different or inorganic nature, but universal elements. Unless it is capable of animal heat and feeling, for it is not the process in which its members, which are rather mere parts, are themselves individuals, are brought back into a negative simple unity. There are thermogenic plants. Okay. Ooh, education. It's actually real.
Yeah, I was just reminded that Matt mentioned ants and bees, and E.O. Wilson basically took the position about like an ant colony or a bee colony is basically should be viewed as a single organism.
Kind of think about it at that point, though, then almost in some ways, human civilization in that same manner.
Yeah,
Which at that point, that's the individual, particular, and universal. You can't split up anyways. They're all self-sufficient with each other. I guess I do. Mhm. Man, I can't even think about much on this right now. The animal, the contrary, when vital.
I sorry.
Stories.
Okay, Kyle, go ahead. 344. You can
Yeah.
read.
Yep. The process of formation and of reproduction of the singular individual in this way coincides with the process of the genus and is a perennial production of new individuals. So the annual resurgence of the plant here, because the self I probably can't pronounce that right. Universality is objective one of the individuality. It does not separate itself from the real particularization, but is only submerged in it. So the plant is not yet a self-subsistent subjectivity over against its implicit organism. Therefore, it can neither freely determine its place, i.e., move from the spot, nor is it for itself in face of the physical particularization and individualization of its implicit organism. Consequently, its nutrition is not an interrupted process, but a continuous flow, and it relates itself not to individualized or inorganic nature, but to the universal elements. Still less is it capable of animal heat and feeling, for it is not the process in which its members, which are rather mere parts, are themselves individuals, are brought back into a negative simple unity.
I feel like we've read this one before because I made the
Yep.
joke about ants.
Yep.
I definitely have not read this on the stream.
Okay, all right. Then I read it offline, and that's what I'm talking about. Sorry.
Yeah,
All
no
right. Yeah,
worries.
yeah. Carry on. You're good.
All right.
You got the baton.
Everything organic is an immanent differentiation which preserves the manifoldness in the unity. Animal life, however, as the truth of the organic sphere, advances to a higher specific difference, such that the difference of the which is pervaded by the substantial form is only one side, and the other side is constituted by the substantial form on its own. Over against it submerges in the difference. The animal consequently has sensation. But the plant has not developed to this difference within itself, to the stage, that is, where the self-like point of unity and the organic crystal would already be the two sides of its life. Accordingly, the vital principle, which in the animal is soul, is in the plant still submerged in the process of the mutually external parts. In the animal, on the contrary, the one vital principle is doubly present. I swear I've been saying doubly way too much in the past year just because of reading Hegel.
You know what's interesting about this description?
Yeah.
If you look at, I mean, it's a translation, so I don't know what the original says exactly. But when he talks about um, in the plant, the soul is submerged in the process of the mutually external parts. If you think about ants and how they're mutually external parts, but they're part of a, like a hive mind, it's almost like he's describing exactly that because I've read places that bees and ants, again with this subject, are more akin to plants than animals in terms of their functioning. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
so
Oh,
it's interesting how close to that with modern science he actually gets in this description. I'm fascinating by that.
and
Okay.
even
Yeah,
though
yeah,
ants
well,
are still good.
Wilson said that. He argued that like ant colonies or bee colonies could be regarded as single organisms.
And it's,
Yeah.
I guess, as I was saying also when Jim said that earlier, it's like, yeah, and you think about how then that relates to like human organization because we're well into, well all the way into animal, but we still have some sort of organization going on as a group. because I guess we are what the only globe spanning organism besides maybe besides plants themselves.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the possum. You know, there are possums in Australia. There's
So
possums here.
they're not the
No.
same animal at all.
Okay. I'm sorry.
The anim the Australian animals are like cute little like I'm trying to think how to describe them, but they're like pretty docile. And then you got the kind of more aggressive American possum.
The feral version.
Yeah,
Completely different teeth structure or
yeah.
something. Yeah. Okay,
Um,
that's funny.
yeah.
So, yeah.
I
So you
remember
were
what.
saying doubly present.
Yeah, as in alpha, as in indwelling and vivifying, and beta as a self-like unity which exists as simple. It is true that both moments in a relation must be present in the plant, but one part of this difference falls outside of its existence. Whereas in the animal, there's a presence, the absolute return of the living organism as self feeling. Yeah, it's kind of like I'm just thinking about kind of like go through the process and you have kind of the reflection and then eventually that sort of self loop as you finally get later on in the logic. So it's just what same evolution everywhere.
Yeah.
Same driving forward of the dialectic. The existent plant, on the other hand, is only one bodily organism in which pure self-like unity with self is not yet present as a reality, but only in the notion, because it's not yet become objective. In the plant, therefore, the body with its members is not yet the objectivity of the soul. The plant is not yet objective to itself. Therefore, for the plant, yeah, there's the not the reflection back. Yeah, therefore, for the plant, unity is something external, just as the process of the organism of the earth falls outside of it. As this
Yes. Yes.
outer physical self of the plant is light toward which it strives, in the same way the man seeks man. Oh, so you were saying, sorry. The plant has an essential infinite relationship with light, but at first is the quest for this itself, like heavy matter. This simple principle of selfhood, which is outside of the plant, is the supreme power over it. Schelling therefore says that if the plant had consciousness, it would worship light as, God, as its god. Yet again, the process of self preservation is to attain the self, to satisfy oneself, to come to self feeling. Yet because the self is outside of the plant, the latter striving after the self is rather being drawn out of itself, so that its return to itself is a perpetual forthgoing, and conversely. Thus, the plant preserves itself by multiplying itself. The externality of the subjective self like unity of the plant is objective in its relation to light, in the same way that light appears externally in the jelly like forms of marine life, and also in the color of birds in the tropics. I feel like now he's talking about this before, but we're thinking about it again here.
Hmm.
Same way that light appears, and of course the color of birds, because that was also how color being used for for birds.
Hang on just a second. Sorry.
Yeah. So there, here, even in the animal world, the power of light is visible. Man fashions the self in more internal fashion, although in southern latitudes he too does not reach a stage where his self, his freedom, is objectively guaranteed. It is from light that plants first get their sap, and in general, a vigorous individualization. Without light, they can indeed grow bigger, but they remain without taste, color, and smell. They therefore turn to the light. Potato plants sprouting in the cellar creep from distances of yards across the floor, decide where the light enters the hole, and they climb up as if they knew the way in order to reach the opening which they can enjoy the light. Yeah, we haven't read this far, but he's definitely said this before. Sunflowers and hosts of flowers follow the motion of the sun and the sky and turn toward it. In the evenings, if one enters a meadow full of flowers from its east side. Yeah, he's repeating himself here. In the evening, if one enters a meadow full of flowers from the east side, only a few flower traps none will be seen because they're all toward the sun, but looking at the flower from the west would make a splendid show. Warning two, when one enters metal from the east, no flowers are seen, not until the sun shines on them. Some, says Will now, do not open out to the sun until noon. Some only at night, like the magnificent torch thistle, which only blooms for a few hours. Now, because as we have said, the subjective one of the plant is fused in its very quality and particularization, and consequently the negative selfhood of the plant is not yet self-related. Therefore, this self too does not yet exist as a purely non-sensuous being, the name of which is simply soul, but is still sensuous. No longer is it true as a material plurality, yet still a sensuous unity of material parts. Now, the sensuous element which remains for the unity is space. Since the plant thus cannot entirely destroy the element of sense, it is not yet pure time within itself. For this reason, the plant is a specific place which it cannot get rid of, although it unfolds itself within it. The animal, however, as process, opposes itself to its place, gets rid of it even though it does posit it afresh. That's literally because it moves. Okay. Similarly, the ego wills to move itself. The point, that is to say, it wills to change its place, i.e., its sensuous immediate existence as point, or the ego wills to distinguish itself as ideality of the one from itself as a sensuous one. And the heavenly motions of bodies of the one system have indeed a free motion, but it is not a contingent motion. Their place is not determined by them as particulars, but by the time of the system, which is rooted by the law in the sun. Okay, now here's a fun look back. Okay. Similarly, in magnetism, the opposed qualities are the determining factors. But in subjective living being, which is its own time, there is negation of place. Negation posited in an absolutely indifferent manner or as an inner indifference. The plant, however, is not yet this mastery over the indifferent, mutually external existence of parts in space, and its space is consequently still an abstract space. The movement of pistols and answers toward each other, the oscillatory movements of Confera, etc., these are to be understood only as a simple growth without any contingent determination of place. The movement of plants is determined by light, heat, and air. Treviranus points out example in plant. At the end of each stem of this plant, there's a larger leaf, elliptical and in shape, and on each side of this, and attached to the same main stem are two smaller parasitic stipules. I think he's like, we have definitely read this before, but it's definitely not this exact section. He's bringing in the same evidence again.
Yeah.
The movements of the main stems leaves are different from those of the stipules. The movement of the main stems are larger leaves consisting in erection in the light and drooping down in the dark. It occurs in the joints which join the leaf, which stem and the latter within the branch. Even the reflection of sunlight from a wall 20 yards away produced a distinct erection of the leaves, and also the screening of sunlight by an opaque body or by a passing cloud resulted in their drooping again. At high noon, and by focusing sunlight through a burning glass, Hoffman observed a trembling movement of the main leaves in the whole plant. Moonlight and artificial light had no influence on the movements. Yeah, okay, I see a solving point. The second movement, go ahead.
So, pursuant to that observation you just made, I keep thinking about fractals in nature. And if you think about it, Hegel, I think, whether consciously or unconsciously, I think is reproducing the fractal in thought. Because notice how earlier he talked about how light and matter mirror the plant reaching for the light, right? It would, you remember?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like he sees the same structure of the universe reproducing itself at different levels. He sees the dialectic at different levels reproducing itself, you know, as reality itself. Like reality itself repeats at all levels in this sort of like continuing repeating pattern at different levels of complexity. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I even commented that the dialectic itself seems to be that kind of self-similarity
Yeah.
within itself too.
Sorry.
That's all right.
The second movement, which is only made by the small foliole Seitenblätter, consists in the alternate erection and drooping of each pair of these leaves, which face each other on the same branch. The movement ceases only with the death of the plant. There are no external causes immediately producing this effect, but it is mostly marked at the time of fertilization. Uh, Trev, Treviranus, however, attributes to the zoospores of the conferva an arbitrary movement even after they become detached from these plants. Some of the movements of the conferva are said to be oscillatory. So, so
Yeah,
he's following through the
showing
wait, okay,
examples of like some sort
like
of
like like the
relationship, right?
the process of formation and reproduction of the single individual. He's going through and detailing at like startling levels of detail, like what's going on with these plants when they interact with light, whether it's from, an internal thing or caused by the external source. You know what I mean? And the difference between the two and you know, left to right, often they twist in such a way that their free end seems to describe a circle, but movement of this kind is still not a voluntary movement. And he he makes that point at the very end. Yes, these movements are happening because the external environment is causing the plant to continue to reach, but is this a voluntary self self what's the word self-subsistent movement,
Yeah,
by the will? No, it's not. And I think we can stop there because it's 9:07,
yeah.
but I want to read past this. Where are we? 310, 309. Okay, so we're at 308B. If you can write that down, Jim, we're at 308. And I think we should read on through, there's 345. Let's see how far down we can get without hurting ourselves. So there's another Goethe sur Morphologie where he gets into the flower and fructification. Why don't we get down? Holy shit! Why don't we get down to 321? Wherever I told you, Jim, I forgot the number already because my brain is that fried. Yeah, from there to from there to 321 would be great, and then we can just summarize and continue on if that's cool with you guys.
Mhm.
Because you notice he's going from the general plant and he's starting to talk about what plants look like in general, and now he's starting to um he's starting to describe the parts of the plant, not just the general abstract plant in general. I'm saying that twice because you know at this level of abstraction, every plant is like every other and roughly abstractly conforms to the same universal laws of plant as every other one. And then when you start to get down to, you know, getting away from the genus into the particular plants, some have flowers and some have, maybe all of them have flowers. Do you know about that, Kyle? Do all plants have flowers or something like it? I don't
No, I
think
think we
so.
got plenty of plants that don't have flowers.
Okay.
They
Okay.
usually
So
have like small little like pores on like their leaves or something.
yeah,
That's kind of like early equivalent, like flowers, like a developed later design of a bud.
yeah. So, eh, the nat you notice the natural universe as we go through this last section of the book is going to start growing skin and organs and become squishy and concrete as opposed to the universal sort of uh, you know, abstract descriptions that we've been dealing with in terms of space and matter and time and all of that. And I find it interesting that we see the crossover from abstract, spaces everywhere kind of arguments to these are the particular and individual living organisms, and here's how they work. And you cross that line. And I always found like a hard and fast line between the two, but with Hegel, you can really see how it's not always as hard and fast as you think, and actually the processes that govern both sides of the line uh, continue to govern whichever side of the line you're on. It's just a matter of being able to find the same patterns on either side of it, the continuation of the fractal. And that's where I bow out rhetorically. Hey, Kyle, I don't know if you watch a lot of TV, Jim. Have either of you heard of a new show called Rooster? It's got Steve Carell and John McGinley. John McGinley is Dr. Cox from Scrubs, and the Scrubs producer or showrunner Bill Lawrence put out this new show called Rooster. It's about this college. It's about this college faculty, and John McGinley slash Dr. Cox runs like the whole college, and Steve Carell comes in as this like writer of like you know, I guess it's romance books. I guess is what he writes. Like he yeah, and he comes in and his daughter works as like uh a teacher at the college. It's hilarious. If you ever watch Scrubs and like Bill Lawrence, what Bill Lawrence does in there, you'll love the new one. I think it's through HBO or something, but
Including the next season of Scrubs too, that they're doing.
yeah, I heard they knocked it out of the park. I just haven't gotten to sit down and watch it
Yeah.
yet, but I heard they
Looks
did a
like
really good job.
some of the comebacks are actually doing it correctly.
Yeah, I'm so grateful for that because there have been so many bad comebacks in the last like 20 years, you know.
Hmm.
Oh, anyway. All right, crew, we have our assignment. I'll talk to you on the flip side or in our DMs. Unless you all have anything else, I'll bid you adieu.
Right, just another meeting.